Let's start from definition of dam. So, dam is a solid barrier constructed at a suitable location across a river valley to store flowing water for different purposes. A dam is a hydraulic structure constructed across a river or a stream to retain the water. Dam construction has different purposes. Let's look at purpose of dam construction. So, storage of water is utilized for hydropower, for irrigation, for domestic consumption like drinking water, for drought and flood control, for navigational facilities, and other additional utilizations like developing fisheries and recreational purposes. So, Ethiopia is rich in natural resources, including water, to produce energy. However, electricity supply is still uncertain. Research shows that the country has the potential to produce about 50,000 megawatt energy from water resources. Yet, it exploited 3,822 megawatt in 2018, and this is approximately 7.6% of its potential. Our country has been implementing different hydropower projects, including the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, for producing energy. In fact, the Gerd is a multi-purpose infrastructure that can help transform Ethiopia's economy through sustainable provision of cheap power, irrigation systems, and storage capacities to protect from floods and droughts while maintaining the environment regulation. The Gerd is a type of gravity dam. According to the dam construction plan, the Gerd will be 1,800 meters long and 145 meters high, and the reservoir capacity will be up to 74 billion cubic meters with an expected installed energy capacity of 6,540 megawatt. The primary purpose of the dam is to generate electricity. In addition, the Gerd will have provisional ecosystem services that provide the benefits for tourism and fishery for local people. The Gerd will contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gas and carbon emission, flood control, and water vapor regulation. The dam construction creates job opportunities for about 10,000 employees. According to the data, most of the people have been obtained energy from biomass. In this case, the Gerd has the potential to enhance the exploitable electricity production in the grid. From an environmental perspective, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is acceptable because it will not cause environmental air pollution. The Gerd will be generating clean energy. This offers the potential contribution to reduce and mitigate climate change impacts. The Ethiopian government is expected to earn huge amount of foreign currencies every year from exporting energy to the region and neighbor countries. And this will have an impact on urbanization and industrial development, with the possibility to create jobs and increase production. From the socio-cultural perspective, the Gerd has potential to integrate the new ecosystem, minimizing the human burden of collecting and using traditional energy sources such as wood and agricultural wastes would be possible to replace by the modern clean energy source. The agricultural and food industries demand adequate, consistent energy supply for their food productions, and the energy of the Gerd can be used for this purpose. The Gerd has potential to use irrigation for an agricultural purpose and thus increase the national food production. The dam will have environmental benefits such as improving the status and suitability of the new ecosystems, water equality, reducing greenhouse gas and carbon emission, and its related impacts. The Gerd is promising in order to achieve some of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals called SDGs at national level. The applicable sectoral integration of the Gerd would have the contribution to some of the UN 2030 agenda of SDGs, such as SDG 7, producing affordable and clean energy, SDG 9, producing energy for the expansion of industry, innovation and infrastructure, because these sectors are important driving factors of economic development and employment. SDG 8, the production of sufficient clean energy attracts more investments and then possible to decrease unemployment rate for decent work and economic growth. And SDG 13, producing clean energy, which has contribution to reduce carbon emission that connected with climate action.
First need to understand what an economy is. An economy is simply defined as the interaction of four major pillars, namely household consumption, investment spending, government spending, and net export, which is the difference between export and imports. The most common measurement of an economic's output is gross domestic product, or the GDP. An economy's output or GDP get distributed among the four pillars. So the equation is GDP is equal to C plus I plus G plus NX, while C stands for consumption, I stands for investment, G stands for government spending, and NX stands for net export. The gross domestic product, GDP. GDP is defined as the market value of all final goods and services produced in a country over a time period, usually in 1 year. GDP figure is quoted in terms of monetary value and using specific currency. For example, the Ethiopian GDP a few years ago was 80 billion USD. This tells us that in Ethiopia, $80 billion worth of goods and services were produced, of which some were consumed domestically, some used for investment and government consumption, and the rest were exported. In Ethiopia, all output comes from three sectors, which are agriculture, industry, and service. Most output come from the agricultural sector, and this is why we often hear that the Ethiopian economy is mainly based on agriculture. For nations whose major output coming from the industrial or service sector are known as industrialized nations. An example of such nations are England and the USA. Economic transformation from agricultural to industry or service. For nations to be industrialized, they need to shift from agricultural production to producing most of their goods and services from the industrial service sectors instead. Examples of industrial goods are automobiles, cement, and heavy metals. Some examples of service products are healthcare and advanced education. Energy, mainly electricity supply, is the most crucial input in order to produce both industrial and service goods. For example, to produce lots of automobiles and cements, a country must be able to get a lot of electric supply. Electricity therefore plays a vital role in order to transform a nation from agricultural-based to an industrialized-based. One of the positive impacts of the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is to enable Ethiopia to become an industrialized nation in the future.
Let's define what negotiation is. It is a process involving two or more people with different interests or goals and discuss an issue in order to reach a mutually acceptable solution. Usually, negotiation takes place between two or more people with conflicting interests with the aim of reconciling their differences. Some might even go as far as saying negotiation is a way of life or a fact of life. Negotiation is a fundamental element in the social, economic, and day-to-day life of people and organizations. Whether you are aware of it or not, you constantly negotiate for resources to ensure the maximum possible outcome for your personal and business endeavors. It is a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement, an attempt to create a shared understanding where there is or where there has previously been contested understanding. A high-stake negotiation is often a long and complex process involving several actors and several contested debates. It can be seen as a process of identifying the convergence of interests between different competing groups. It can certainly be a tiring and arduous task to undertake.
Hydroelectric power is the production of electricity by harnessing the gravitational potential energy of falling water without using up the water. There are three types of hydroelectric power facilities. These are impoundment, diversion, and pumped storage. The most common type of hydroelectric power plant is an impoundment facility. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam can be considered as a typical example for an impoundment facility. The major components of hydroelectric power plants are the following. Dams. A dam is any retaining structure built across a river to stop or regulate its flow and to raise the water level. Once a dam is built, water accumulates behind it to form a lake or a dam reservoir. Thus, it also includes containment structures for large or small body of impounded water. Turbines. A turbine is generally a machine that transforms rotational energy from a fluid that's picked up by a rotor system into usable work or energy. Generators. Generators are devices that convert mechanical energy into electrical energy. Then we have the transmission lines. These are interconnector lines that move electricity from generating stations to distribution substations, where it's transformed to lower voltage for customers. In a hydroelectric power station, the flowing water is stored in high-altitude rivers by constructing dams and stored in huge reservoirs behind the dam. The water stored possesses very large amount of potential energy. When this water is released, it flows down by gravity and the potential energy is converted into kinetic energy. The water is then allowed to pass through pipes called penstocks and fall on the blades of big turbines. The force of the falling water pushing against the turbine's blade causes the turbine to spin. The turbines convert the kinetic energy of the falling water into mechanical energy. These turbines are connected to electrical generators. When the shaft of the turbines rotates, the generator coil also rotates rapidly and produces electricity by the principle of electromagnetic induction.
Let's look at the Curriculum Plus topic, which is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and the negotiations between Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan. This is only a basic highlight and not a detailed analysis of the negotiations taking place. This has been a very long, almost 10 years long, negotiation which is still going on with a deal that is yet to be agreed. What do you know about the negotiations taking place so far? Take a few minutes to think about it and discuss with your family. There are 3 countries involved in the dam negotiations: Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan. But why are Egypt and Sudan negotiating on an Ethiopian dam? From what you've read so far and from what you've heard on the news, what do you think are the main positions of the 3 countries? What do they all want? And how can Ethiopia secure what it wants? In a negotiation, it is very important to know what the other side wants in order to discuss the differences and agree upon a solution. Remember, the other side is your partner in the negotiation. This is Ethiopia's position. Ethiopia insists that the Gerd is essential for its development and lifting of its populations out of poverty, and assures the other states that they won't be significantly harmed by the development project. And here is Egypt's position. Egypt wants their historical water shares not to be reduced and fear the dam will threaten their water amount. And Sudan, on the other side, believes or wants the water levels in its medium-sized dams not to be reduced and wants water to be released from the Gerd reservoir during high drought years. So how do you think this will turn out? What compromises or concessions do you think the countries will make to reach a final deal? Discuss it with your peers and with your family. The negotiations are very complicated and sensitive to all 3 countries, and there are many more issues that go into it. For example, one key sticking disagreement between Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan is the argument pushed by Egypt to have a legally binding agreement on future water use tied with the dam negotiations. And this is not acceptable for Ethiopia. Ethiopia rejects this on the account of including all the Nile Basin countries in the general future water share negotiations. but stresses the need to separate the dam negotiations from water sharing negotiations. Now let's look at the offers proposed, or the stakes for each country in the negotiation. For Egypt, the stake is ensuring constant flow of water during the changing seasons. Egypt wants to maintain the water levels in the high Aswan Dam during the summer seasons. For Sudan, flood waters during the rainy season, which destroy crops, can be controlled, and regular water supply for irrigation can be maintained by the Gerd throughout the year. For Ethiopia, generation of much needed energy to facilitate economic growth and poverty alleviation. The dam can also be a tool of regional integration and cooperation in mutually beneficial development projects. So, after all these years, the negotiations are still going on, and currently they are being hosted by the African Union.
The amount of electricity that can be generated from a hydroelectric power depends on two factors.
The first factor that affects the power generation is flow rate. Flow rate represents the quantity of water flowing in a given time. When more water flows through a turbine, more electricity can be produced. The flow rate depends on the size of the river and the amount of water flowing in it. Power production is considered to be directly proportional to flow rate. That is, twice as much water flowing will produce twice as much electricity. The second factor is the head. By head, what we mean is the height from which the water falls. The farther the water falls, the more power it has. The higher the dam, the further the water falls, producing more hydroelectric power. Power production is also directly proportional to head. That is, water falling twice as far will produce twice as much electricity. A standard mathematical equation for calculating power generation of a hydroelectric turbine is P is equal to eta times rho times G times Q times H, where eta is the efficiency of the system, rho, which is equal to 1000 kg per meter cube, is the density of water, G, which is 9.8 meter per second square, is the gravitational constant, Q is the volume of water flow or discharge, and H is the effective head of the water. It's important to note that the loss due to friction before the water reaches the turbine and the loss in the plant itself are taken into consideration by using the effective head rather than the gross head and the plant efficiency, eta, respectively.
Ethiopia is industrialized. So what's next? So if Ethiopia becomes industrialized, the following good things will come. Number one, economic impact of the Gerd. Most industrial goods and services will be available at a fair price in the country which the country could have imported otherwise. So less import of expensive products. B, the country's GDP will grow significantly, and when this happens, the GDP per capita will grow as well, making the lives of most Ethiopians better. C, most investors will be motivated to invest in Ethiopia, and as a result of this, most Ethiopians will find jobs, which this reduces the unemployment rate in the country. D, the four pillars of the economy, known as consumption, investment, government spending, and net export, will grow accordingly, and making the overall Ethiopian economy grow as well. Number two, other benefits of the Gerd. Most foreign aids will reduce since the Ethiopian economy generates lots of income from the Gerd. This helps to build the image of the country. B, it helps to develop and enhance diplomatic relationship of the country with its neighbors, as the electric power from the Gerd could be exported at fair price to the countries. C, it helps to the country to utilize its natural resources of the Nile River. D, it helps to lift millions of Ethiopians out of poverty, which this helps to improve the Human Development Index of the country, known as HDI.